So gold is signaling that boomers are still in charge and they are not going quietly. They want to go out with a big bang.
The U.S. empire had a 100-year reign with the U.S. dollar as world reserve currency. Seemingly now that's coming to an end as well, to hit a cyclical turning point. All of the other countries out there that were forced to use the dollar are now not using the dollar. Because of this freedom of speech curtailment, I don't see how there's going to be a generation like a Steve Jobs generation to step in and innovate, because they'll be shut down. Gold is for boomers, and it's a bet on death and destruction. And Bitcoin is for everybody past the boomers.
It's an escape hatch out of their hate asylum.
That's the main point. That's the theme.
I thought it was a weekend, and I was surprised when a friend sent us a message saying, hey, look, gold just soared through 2000. I was like, what do you mean? It's like Saturday or Sunday. Only Bitcoin trades on the weekend. And lo and behold, it was a weekday. So, while it is a holiday here and a lot of people are gone, the rest of the markets and the rest of the world, the US, Europe, are still like active. And gold, I looked over there and it was 2022. And so then I started to look and see what the news was. And of course, the news was that Finland had, become a member of NATO officially that same morning. And then you could see gold spike up. So I'm going to read you this really amazing tweet thread. It's just 2 tweets. It's like one of the best tweet threads I've ever read. And I wrote it. So gold is signaling that boomers are still in charge and they are not going quietly. They want to go out with a big bang. Just as Hiroshima and Nagasaki heralded the age of the boomer, their war in Europe promises to send them off in the same way that they entered the world. So it was almost like celebratory. Of course, when Bitcoin goes up in the same sort of trajectory, usually it's like, you gotta pump it up, pump up. Like there's like fun and joy, right? But when gold does that, it's like bad news. Bitcoin is a bet on the future of humanity, using the words of Paul Tudor Jones, who had said that like 2 years ago. Gold is a bet on the boomer fantasies of nuclear annihilation being made real life. And the boomers have been preparing for the latter since they were first conceived in August 1945, which is when Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened. And the first boomers were born in 1946. So I'm saying like they were literally conceived amidst the fallout of a nuclear fallout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Bitcoin is the escape hatch from their hate asylum.
Literally speaking, the signifiers and the symbols and the signs of a cyclical turn are visually there. They're in the database. They came up with the duck and cover right away, which is a signifier of the boomer era. Yeah. And we're at that change in the cycle. The boomers are clearly now no longer in charge. The boomer era is clearly over. The U.S. empire had a 100-year reign with the U.S. dollar as world reserve currency. Seemingly now that's coming to an end as well, to hit a cyclical turning point. All of the other countries out there that were forced to use the dollar are now not using the dollar. Most notably, 2 that I saw last week, aside from Russia and China, would be Saudi Arabia and Japan, have also decided that they are no longer on the U.S. dollar as reserve currency bandwagon anymore. They're going to start trading commodities and something outside of the dollar. So people really rejected the idea that the mass shootings came out of a culture of violence, because he made that point that the parents of these children were working for these major defense contractors, and that the American foreign policy is basically quite crude, right? It's one where if you don't trade in U.S. dollars, we kill people in your country. And that's our foreign policy. And we've got every 50 cents of every tax dollar to back it up over there at the Pentagon. And their primary job is to back fiat money, the U.S. dollar. And so it trickles down. So the violence trickles down to the high school mass shooter. And the society generally rejected that. And I think over this past 25 years, instead of a society coming to terms with that, they have metamorphosized into a freak show. So today in society, the American society has become unrecognizable to anyone who's maybe living in the 1950s, or maybe someone in the 1970s or 80s even. It's become completely unrecognizable. And I think that's part of the denial process of the society failing to come to grips with its inherently violent nature and deciding instead that these other issues are somehow defining. And that kind of decadence generally marks the end of a society. And I think that's what we're witnessing. There's a great urge to hit the reset button and pretend like there was no past or was no history. And I think that in the American society, there's a desperate need to forget our history. We didn't want to talk about the genocide of the native population that's been swept under the rug or glorified as manifest destiny was the phrase that was invented to glorify the genocide of the native population. We don't want to talk about slavery, although that's been now come up and being actively talked about again. But that was something that was really a taboo subject for so long, and people don't want to talk about it. And so we have this need to kind of squeegee away the past and forget about it. The great corrective to allow for the truth to come out in a more spontaneous way would be freedom of speech. So the speech freedom has been curtailed. And with curtailing of freedom of speech comes the rotting of the discussion, where there's no real dynamism to public discourse. It's all in the channels preordained by, in this case, corporations. So you have no truth. People are festering in their own psychosis. So society's become psychotic, essentially. Apparently they are that stupid. But I think it just goes back to, again, this idea where the unwillingness to see the truth objectively requires an ever greater elaboration of the tale, of the story, of the narrative, of the drama. The last thing anybody wants to do is to look at this truthfully. The truth is, if it was trading on the New York Stock Exchange, would be trading at zero. The truth is the first casualty of war. How about that? That's a quote you often hear.
That's right.
And we're in a war. We're in all kind of war. Information war. We're in a hot war. We're in Thucydides's trap, which is turning into a hot war. We're turning into a cold war as a hot war. So the first casualty is always truth. Because of this freedom of speech curtailment, I don't see how there's going to be a generation like a Steve Jobs generation to step in and innovate, because they'll be shut down. I mean, the Black-Scholes option pricing volatility formula, as you say, was the separation of risk from reward, which was similar to the cleaving of atoms into matter and energy, which gave us the atomic bomb. We had the derivatives bomb, and then starting in the 1980s, and Reagan poured fuel on the fire by deregulating. So it's deregulating plus derivatives. It gave us the bull market of the 1980s and gave us really a 40 to 42 year bull market in the bond market, because this was all a product of being able to take interest rates down to zero or even negative rates, was the use of derivatives, and you'd be able to take reward and put it into one area of the economy and take the risks and dump it into another area of the economy. When people say, oh, it's capitalism for the rich and socialism for the poor, that's a common meme that's been popped up for a few years since Occupy Wall Street. And what that refers to is this exact idea. Since the invention of derivatives and the cleaving of risk and reward into their separate components and trading separately, you have the ability for the Wall Street class of individuals to keep the reward and dump the risk using financial derivatives products. In the old days, you needed to go into another country and steal their shit.
Yeah.
With derivatives, you don't need to actually do that.
No.
You just manipulate financial markets to steal people's shit.
Yes. So it's way more efficient.
Journalists and pundits around the world are really forensically picking through this and coming up with jewels that were published earlier by Stacey Herbert. And it's about gold is for boomers, and it's a bet on death and destruction. And Bitcoin is for everybody past the boomers.
It's an escape hatch out of their hate asylum.
That's the main point. That's the theme.
We say don't trust the mainstream media or the FUD. Come to El Salvador and verify for yourself what we say. So here's Marco Rubio. And if you look at him last year, he wasn't horrible about El Salvador, but he was not glowing about El Salvador. He didn't say the the nice things that you and I were saying about what was going on here as the war on gangs was liberating populations, for example, in Soyapango or Popa or Ilopango, right? So he came here, he saw for himself, and just the transformation of Senator Marco Rubio. Like you could see it seeping. You could see President Bukele. You could see El Salvador. You could see what he saw seeping into him every day. He gets more. He's thinking more and loving more and more enthusiastic. And posted that amazing video, like shocking, like really powerful endorsement of President Bukele and what he saw here in terms of the liberation of the people and the protection by the state of the right to life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness.
And the video is remarkable because it really gives a whole, encapsulates what's been going on and why everything is quite a special situation.
Yes, he did have dinner with the president. Obviously, the president is very charming and entertaining and a really smart, interesting guy. But he also spent a day and a half like traveling around and meeting people and talking to families and visiting locations. So it wasn't just like meeting with the president. It's important to say that he actually saw El Salvador. He met people.